Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review everything, everywhere, all at once. So, for this movie, I gotta say, visuals are cool, but really anything else other than that? Really, we have a very, bizarre story. 2022 is to kind of give us some very weird and bizarre films, or in this case, we just have the kitchen sink of random crap that is just to be slammed in a movie, and we're just to go on and be like, when really we're like, really to go on and kind of do some kind of teeing up of this movie. We go on and we literally have a rock having a thing of dialogue between another rock, and it's not them talking to one another, it's just subtitles. If we don't have enough subtitles in this movie, I swear, because it seems almost half the movie is subtitled out, or I'd probably recommend people watching the whole entire movie with subtitles anyways, because a lot of the dialogue is fairly rushed. To where, of course, I'm like, what do they say? I just seriously have to backpedal at some points in this movie to just kind of rehear dialogue. So I'm like, oh, that's the gibberish that they just flew out of their mouth with. Okay, great. So dialogue means nothing in this film. Great. As well as us. Here's the tee up. So Evelyn is to be in this world working at a laundromat, and so at one point in this film, she is to meet a Waymond from another world who is to most of the time be in her Waymond's body, telling her that the fate of the multiverse is to rest upon Evelyn as this villain who is Jobu Tupaki, who eventually at some point Evelyn is to call Jojo Chewbacca or something like that, because eventually she doesn't understand who she's even fighting in this film. But eventually she'll find out that it's actually maybe not her worlds, but technically her daughter. So we have it, of course, where Evelyn is to possibly be finding her own daughter, because maybe her daughter represents any number of things that she just does not like, or accept, or whatever. And maybe it's a whole generational thing. I don't know. But anyways, so Evelyn at some point is to have to do these weird, goofy, bizarro things to channel a universe jump to be able to obtain an ability from some other Evelyn on some alternate Earth, Z's ability, so then Evelyn can take this to her world and be able to fight off Jobu Tupake, or a evil version of Deirdre, who is to be played by Jamie Lee Curtis in this film. And we just have a lot of goofy, bizarre things going on in this movie. Even at some points when I probably will get into spoilers, I might not be able to describe everything, but I will try to do my best. There is some times where Evelyn is to go on and obtain abilities from her in an alternate world where she is to be this sign flipper, and she is to obtain a karate ability from this movie actress version of her, which I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And then as we go on and on and on, we have it to where there keeps being these random variations that we are to go on and find that Evelyn is to have throughout this film. At some points, Evelyn is to even go on and trying to name off this movie called Ratatouille that eventually she thinks is some alternate version, and then come to find out we have Evelyn who is to go to that alternate version of whatever the heck it is that Evelyn was talking about, because Sushi Chef. And so just bizarre things. I will probably get to some of them within this review. This movie is so weird. But so we go on and we have Evelyn, who again is to be working at this laundromat, if I hadn't said that before. Evelyn is to have it be Chinese New Year, and so Evelyn is to try to go on and get her taxes done. And so when she is to go and get her taxes done, she meets up with a woman named Deirdre, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And we have Evelyn meet with this uh, prime world version of Waymond, who is to step inside her husband, Evelyn's husband, Waymond's body, and is to try and tell Evelyn the fate of the multiverse is to really rest on Evelyn, and that she needs to do these random things to be able to talk to Waymond more, so he can help her before she ends up being killed in this world. Because she, of course, is the prime Evelyn after his Evelyn was to die. So she's become the new prime Evelyn, where this prime Evelyn is to be able to take every other ability from alternate Evelyns and to collectively obtain them. And so we go on, and it seems that Jobu Tupake was to, of course, eventually be able to obtain every other version of Joy. And so now Evelyn, eventually through some part of this film, has to decide that she has to go on and do the exact same thing. And so with that said, I'll just kind of leave it at that. They have to kind of be evenly matched, and so eventually we go on and have certain people of this family that are trying to analyze and assess the situation and think like, well, hey, this may be too dangerous, like you're going too far, yada yada yada. So with that said, grading wise, this movie has to easily just be a awful film. It's an awful film, but it's visually interesting. People will probably just see this regardless, and they would probably want to justify having like subtitles throughout this movie, because a lot of the times, if it's not in another language anyways, this movie is to also like be very quick on their dialogue throughout most of this movie. And so I missed like I would miss a lot of the dialogue if it wasn't with subtitles. I'm like, what is going on? What are they saying there? So I'll right away give you an app that you can dare in fact watch this movie for absolutely free with dialogue, so you can, or with subtitles, so you can be able to like kind of get the gist of what's going on, or maybe you can just go on and watch the movie regardless. So with that said, let's go on. So currently the second of this recording, I would go on and recommend eventually someone go on to a Google Play Store and search two words TV Crush. Hopefully you'll be able to go on and find an app that there in fact says HD Movies with the crown off to the side. Download this app, be able to see everywhere, or everything everywhere all at once for absolutely free with subtitles, because there'll be subtitles through half the movie anyways. Uh, Whether you like it to or not, unless you're bilingual, then best of both worlds for you. But moving on. You can also go into a Google search and search the word letter C movies. So just C movies app. And hopefully you'll dare in fact be able to search for this and go on and be able to download this app and see a lot of things for absolutely free upon a possible Google search. The next app would go on and eventually have me recommend to you a app called Fox HD Movies. Regardless of what I probably say next, this may help you or hinder you be able to find this app, but regardless. Because the logo will say Fox HD Movies, but the title will say something different on this app. It'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. There might be some other words after that, but I'm not sure, because that seems to be what all that's said in that app. go ahead and Google search this, and hopefully you'll be able to find an app you can download and be able to say that you can see a bunch of movies for absolutely free, brand new releases, premium access stuff, all that stuff that you would normally have to have some kind of fees for, or you would have to go in an exclusive app to have a monthly fee for. You can see all this stuff with an app like this for absolutely free. Yeah, there'd be ads in between the movie, but that's what you get for watching a free movie. Anyways, so now that all of that stuff is going on and said and been a thing, I'm just going to go into spoilers because this movie is going to be hard enough to try to figure out everything that happened within this movie. Everything, everywhere, all at once. So with that said, let's go on into that double 5-time territory. Let's just go into spoilers. I might not be exactly specific about everything that entails within this movie because at the end of the day, there's a lot of that happens. It's very difficult. I would rather just want to try to get the spoilers done as quickly as possible. Go out of your way to see this movie for absolutely free, because more than likely you'll just be like, man, he just forgot about a lot of and I'd just be like, well, yeah, because this movie has a lot of in it. So with that said, let's go into spoilers. So in the beginning of this movie, we of course have Evelyn, who's adjusting all these taxes that she's getting ready for her being audited. And so we have Waymond, who is going on and talking to Evelyn about this auditing, and that Evelyn has really put a lot of work into that. And so we go on and have it also where Waymond is talking to Evelyn about Gong Gong, who is Evelyn's father, and that at some point he's going to get up soon and want breakfast and all this other stuff, as well as Evelyn and Waymond having to go down and having to fix some problems with certain people that want certain things in the laundromat. We go on and we have it to where Evelyn is to be talking to a person in IMDb that's called Dog Mom, but Evelyn consistently calls her Big Nose. And it seems that Big Nose is to want to go on and want her clothes. And so eventually Waymond is to mention that there is a bag that he put in an alternate location where it should not have been. And so Evelyn is kind of angry with Waymond for going on and putting googly eyes on this bag. So, because Waymond tends to put googly eyes on everything. So, we have it where also there's another customer that is to be upset because $20 had been eaten from this machine. So Waymond is going on and eventually being alternate prime Waymond and using all these karate goofy things to get this money for this guy and to bring it back to him. And so we have it to where, of course, Joy with her girlfriend named Becky are making their way to this laundromat. So we go on and we are having Joy wanting to come to her mother's place because she's cooking food, Chinese New Year. Hopefully I'm saying that right. So we go on and have it, of course, where we have Joy making her way with her girlfriend. And so we have to where Bong Bong is to wake up and is to be asking where is breakfast. And so all of a sudden Joy is at this laundromat talking to her mother, mentioning that now Becky is here, and Evelyn is like, oh great, now I have to cook more food. If I haven't cooked enough food, now I have to cook an extra thing of food for Becky. It's like, is it really that hard? It's just another person. It's not like you had to like pan out perfect portions and whatever. But anyways, so Joey is trying to go on and tell Bong Bong her grandfather, or Gong Gong. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. So Joey's mentioning to Gong Gong that she's trying to say it in Chinese, and hopefully I'm saying this correctly, because she's trying to say it in a different language. And we go on and we have her grandfather that's telling Joy, it's like, you know what, every time that you like speak to me in another language, like you sound worse every single time. So Joy is to try to pronounce that Becky is her girlfriend, and so Evelyn just kind of chimes in and tells Gong Gong that Becky is Joy's friend, and like that they're just really good friends. And so now we just have it to where, of course, Joy is upset about that. She just wants to walk away from her father and her family, because we have it to where Evelyn is very judgmental and just want to go on and tell Joy and Becky how to live their lives, like having Evelyn telling Becky to grow out her hair, or to tell Joy that she looks too fat, or something like that. Because Evelyn just wants to be very controlling of how her daughter looks. So Evelyn, of course, to be very upset with her mother to the point of her wanting to drive off. So we have Evelyn, who is to have to go on and make her way to get her taxes done by Deirdre, who is Jamie Lee Curtis. So we go on and we have it, of course, where Evelyn, Gong Gong, and Wayman are now all in this elevator together. And we all of a sudden have Waymond, who is to turn into prime version of Waymond, who is to have this weird goofy ability to like somehow be inside Waymond's body in this alternate world, to have this ability like Evelyn does to do all these goofy things so he can obtain these kind of skills. So we go on and we have Waymond telling Evelyn that she needs to go on and do a number of things that he's going to write off here, so that way Evelyn can now talk to Waymond, but the prime Waymond. And so Waymond is trying to tell Evelyn, like, the fate of the multiverse is to be resting on your hands. You're the prime version of Evelyn, because my Evelyn was to, of course, get killed, so on and so forth. So, and eventually, Jobu Tupake is to come after you and try to kill you in this world. So, like, eventually you're going to have to go on and talk to me so I can help you. So, all of a sudden, Evelyn is to be having this umbrella being popped open, and so the umbrella could be kind of put into this camera, and so Waymond is going on and telling her all this, and then making his way to be like put back into this Earth's Waymond. So we have it where Evelyn is telling Waymond, it's like, man, your English has really improved, and Waymond's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I don't know what you were talking about before, but like, and so Waymond was like, well, like, this is like the quickest elevator that I've ever been in, so let's go. So they all go on to meet up with Deirdre, who again is Jamie Lee Curtis. So Deirdre is going on and like telling them all about these things that they're trying to write off on their taxes that doesn't make sense, like a karaoke machine, or saying that Evelyn is some like singing teacher, or that she used to do a number of odd jobs while in this laundromat. And Deirdre's like, no, like, you can't write all of this off. Like, if anything, like, I think you wanted to just like go on and take advantage of the system. And Deirdre is going on and saying that, like, I think that this is going to accumulate into some gross negligence, and like, I think that this might go on and get you guys in trouble. So we go on and we have Evelyn, who is kind of half listening, half not, as she's kind of popping out this list of things that she needs to do. So Evelyn is going on and putting her shoes in the wrong foot, going and like turning on these Bluetooth things that Waymond had put on her ears, and imagining that she's in this janitor closet. So she somehow astro projects, which basically means like the spirit from Evelyn's body is to be in two places at once, as Evelyn is to be in autopilot talking to Deirdre while also going on and talking to Waymond in this janitor's uh, room. So we have Waymond, who I guess is also to be astro projecting here, and as the spirit of him is in this janitor's closet, while the other Waymond is in talking with Deirdre as well as Evelyn is. So we go on and we have Waymond telling Evelyn like all the stuff that he is to go on and tell her, that eventually she'll need to figure out how to universe jump and obtain all these other abilities from all these different versions of her, because he's a alternate world version of her husband, and so on and so forth. So Evelyn is to go on and really want to do what this other version of Waymond is to go on and say here. So we go on and we have Evelyn and Waymond and Gong Gong who leave Deirdre, because Waymond is to ask Deirdre, it's like, well, hey, like, can we just go on and try all of this all over again? Could we bring this in like tomorrow and be able to like refigure this all out? And Deirdre's like, sure, fine, like you guys can turn this in like tomorrow. And so Waymond's like, thank you, we'll just try to figure all this out, and we'll go on and try to do the best we can here. So as they're leaving, we go on and we have Deirdre, who is to eventually make her way to Evelyn and Waymond and Gong Gong as they're making it to the elevator. And so in this alternate thing where of course we have it where they're in this janitor's room, we had it to where Deirdre was to have this kind of papered circle upon her head and was going on and tearing through this janitor's closet to go and try to kill both Evelyn and Waymond. And so Evelyn decides to jump from where she was to back to where her world's Evelyn is. So we all of a sudden go on and have that prime Waymond telling Evelyn that she needs to fight. And so Evelyn goes back to her version of herself and is now talking to normal, like her world Waymond. And so Evelyn is to now realize that Waymond is to be showing Evelyn these divorce papers that he, of course, wanted to file to leave Evelyn. So we go on and we have Evelyn, who's not really paying any much attention to like the whole divorce paper thing, and she's seeing Deirdre that is walking her way close to them, and so Evelyn punches Deirdre in the face, and Deirdre's like, oh my god, you just punched an IRS associate and you're gonna pay. So Deirdre is now calling these security guards, so all of a sudden a bunch of security guards are to show up, and so Waymond is to turn back into prime version Waymond. So we go on and we have prime Waymond that is taking his fanny pack and using it as a weapon against all these security guards. And so we go on and we have it to where Waymond is putting this this aquarium rocks, and he's putting it into his fanny pack to try to weight it. And so he goes on and starts fighting all these people with his fanny pack and takes them all out. And Waymond is to also go on and be able to like chew a thing of chapstick. He just bites into it and starts chewing it. And he takes this gum from off this desk and starts like eating it. And I'm like, oh my god, this is freaking weird. But anyways, so Waymond does all this stuff to eventually take out all these security guards, and eventually all of it works. So we then move on and realize that Jobu Tupake is to realize what is going on with Evelyn. And so now we have Jobu, who is to eventually go on to the Earth where Joy is to eventually be in Evelyn's world. And so now Jobu is Joy, and so she's going to go off and try to take down Evelyn. So we then go on and have it, of course, where eventually Gong Gong is eventually to get out of the picture. And so we then transition into eventually having Evelyn and Waymond needing to go on and fight Deirdre, who is to have this black circle over her head, and they're fighting her in what is to look like a kind of office space. So we have it to where Waymond is going on and telling Evelyn that she needs to go on and look at Deirdre and tell her that she loves her and that she has to mean it. So that way she can channel this alternate version of herself who can fight, because she has to go and fight against Deirdre. This Deirdre who is to go on and be this monstrous character, even though Jamie Lee Curtis is a really nice woman. So, it's just the way it is. So, it's just the way life is. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, pushing on. So, Evelyn is to go on and try to just say, I love you, and, like, she ends up hitting her Bluetooth, and she ends up going into some slight, tweakingly different variation of herself that doesn't really factor much into like a fighting scenario. And so Waymond is trying to go on and consistently fight Deirdre, while Evelyn is to try to figure things out. So when Evelyn is to finally go on and be able to convincingly say that she loves Deirdre, as Deirdre is flying down these flights of stairs trying to get at her, Evelyn is to go on and finally say this and hit the thing perfectly, and then be able to swat away Deirdre and realize that she had, at one point, had a life where she never went on and went with Waymond and never had a life with him, and Evelyn all of a sudden, somehow or another, was to be eventually a movie actress, and was to go on and have like a number of action movies that she is to have gone on and done. And so Evelyn is to be this person with this fighting skill. So Evelyn is going on and trying to fight Deirdre, and eventually is to go on and figure out a way to take her out. Not exactly kill her, but just kind of take her out. Because eventually, like, Deirdre will be, like, through the rest of this film, one way or the other. So, which is cool, because eventually you'll see multiple different variations of Jamie Lee Curtis through this movie anyways. So, we go on. So, now that technically Deirdre had failed, we now have to move on and have Evelyn fight Jobu. So, we go on, and we now have it where Evelyn is to meet with her villain in this story, which is Jobu Tupake. And so we go on and we have it toward Jobu and Evelyn within the same hallway are to have a number of police officers that are all going on and trying to figure out what's going on here. And so we have Jobu, who is to basically be this, like, I would have to like refer to like the Jim Carrey mask kind of character, because all of a sudden we have Jobu turn, and this is Joy, let me remind you, that is turning into all kinds of tweakingly different versions of Joy. So at some point, she is to turn into this like mariachi dancer when she touches this other guy. This guy all of a sudden has this whole thing of fruit on his head, and they're both dancing, and she ends up taking this guy out. We have Joy that goes on and is to become this wrestler and is to perform this slamming move on this guy and is to take him out. We have at one point one of the police officers who ends up shooting Joy, and Joy is to say it's like, oh, well, it's just natural, as she grabs this thing of ketchup and is to showcase that she didn't really get killed here because this girl is like unstoppable. So we go on and we have Jobu that is going and taking all these security guys down. And so now we finally have it to where Joy is to try to tell Evelyn, it's like, well, hey, like, you need to go on and you really need to understand what's really going on here. And eventually that you're going to have to understand that you need to be just as good as Joy and eventually become as powerful as Joy. And then there's a lot of build-up where Evelyn is trying to do all of these rando things to eventually try to build up to be as powerful as Joy, and then she's going to have to go on and fight all of these rando guys. At some point, there's one guy without pants on, and you're seeing him being censored, but you can't really see anything. But anyways, we also have at one point where Joy is to beat up a police officer with basically some adult toys. To the point where I don't want to really describe them because eventually I would get probably flagged for effing something. But if anybody is to see a man's manhood being smacked around and hit with people, that's what I'm going with here. So we go on and we have Evelyn, who is desperately trying to go on and channel some alternate version of herself to try and defeat Joy here. But the only thing that she can come up with is a world where Evelyn is to have hot dogs for hands, and her hands are just very like wibbly and wobbly and whatever. And so it seems that in the hot dog world story, we have it where Evelyn is to, I guess, be in love with Deirdre, and that also everyone else is to have hot dogs for hands. Every time, I guess, somebody is to be weirdly sucking upon these hot dog hands, there is to be, like, going on and spraying out, like, ketchup and mustard. It's freaking weird, but I guess it is what it is with that story. So Evelyn, who is to now go on and eventually have these kind of floppy hands, and there's nothing that she can do with this now. We have Joy, who takes advantage of this and is to take Evelyn's hands and is to show her this bagel with everything on it through this hole through both of their combined hands. So Joy is to show this bagel with everything, and I mean everything on it, like tax returns, old photos, everything. And so Joy is to mention, it's like, well, yeah, like I never realized what would happen when I would put everything on a bagel, and here's what would happen. Like, it would go on and seem to look like some, like, black hole of sorts that eventually would be something that I guess Joy would be either worshipping or at some point would just be the possible destruction of life as we know it. But so Evelyn is going on and watching as this bagel that is to have every single thing on it. And so we go on and we have it to where Evelyn is to eventually realize that she needs to go on and eventually obtain all of these crazy powers so then she can eventually try and go on and defeat Joy. We also have it to where Gong Gong from the Prime World is to come in and try to eventually control what's going on here in this world, trying to eventually tell this Evelyn that like he doesn't think that she's going to be able to like defeat her own daughter. That at some point, Evelyn may go on and have to kill the normal Joy, not the Jobu Chewbacca. No, that she may have to go on and kill this world's Joy, so that way it limits how many Joys there are in the world. So, because we have it to where eventually, while Evelyn is trying to fight off Joy, it seems that Jubaku or Jobu Tupake is to go back to her world, and then this normal Joy is back into the scene of things, and she's like, "What the heck is going on?" And so Evelyn is to go on and tie up Joy, and Waymond, who is also to not be like the prime self of him, he's to be the normal self, is to try to untie Joy. And Evan's like, no, don't, like, keep her tied up. Because what happens is we have Jobu Tupake, who ends up finding Prime Waymond in their world, and she ends up finding out, like, the vehicle that he's in, and so she goes on and she is to take down this vehicle, and now has Waymond, who has tried to desperately go on and figure out a way to make his way back to Evelyn. So, in her alternate world to try to help her. So, there's that for you. Like, it kind of jostles both of these characters to be back to who they actually are, and Joy is very confused of what the heck that she's even wearing, because this is not normal Joy. So, we go on and we have Gong Gong that has this kind of weird wheelchair set up from this Prime World, and like it's very tech-like. It seems that Gong Gong could also change this wheelchair into being like this kind of armor kind of thing that kind of wraps around him. It's almost kind of like just tech-like or whatever. It's weird. So we go on into this story, and so Evelyn is to try to figure out what the heck is going on. And so what she really decides is that she wants to go on and try to obtain every single other Evelyn's power, and to go on and do all these odd things to get every bit of every thing that she can go on and do to figure all this stuff out. So Evelyn is to go into multiple different worlds. So she goes on and is eventually to go back to the movie star world, where she's to talk to Waymond, and Waymond is to mention that it's been a while since he's seen Evelyn, because, like, in this world, they had never really met one another. And so Evelyn is going on and telling Waymond about another world where they had been working at this laundromat and all these other things, and they were poor. And Waymond's like, well, wow, like, that sounds like quite a world and whatever. So Evelyn and Waymond, after this movie is over, is going on and eventually like talking to one another, have this dialogue where Waymond is thinking like, well, it would be like a really great world if I went on and just had my life be with you. And Evelyn's like, well, I would have liked that also, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of just subtitle reading within this dialogue. So that seems to be the more key important part. But we had a point where Evelyn was going to have this box cutter and was going to kill Joy in Evelyn's world, the Evelyn, like the real Evelyn, and instead she goes on and cuts the ties of Joy, or cuts the tape of Joy, and is to release her because Evelyn needs to want to become more powerful. So Evelyn goes into so many different worlds. She goes into a world where she's a sushi chef and is to find that this guy is to have this raccoon that is controlling him to be able to be this sushi chef. So it's like Ratatouille, but instead it's with a raccoon instead of a rat. Kind of like how Evelyn was to say at some part of this movie. So we go on, and we also have Evelyn that is to also go into sign flipping worlds and all kinds of these other goofy worlds, and eventually try to talk to Joy while being this rock. And she goes on and she's trying to obtain all of these abilities in all these worlds. And so Evelyn is going on in her world. When she makes it back there, she's going on and finding a number of men that are trying to go on and fight her, as well as Joy wanting to take Evelyn and wanting to showcase her that there's this other world where everybody's going on and worshiping the bagel that has everything. And so we go on and have Joy in this world, who is to have this kind of this black donut shaped hair, and everybody's to go on to be worshiping this bagel that has everything. And so we go on and have Joy, who's showing Evelyn the bagel that has everything, and so on and so forth. So we go on, and we consistently have it to where Gong Gong is telling Evelyn that eventually she'll have to kill her daughter. Like, it's inevitable. It has to happen. So we go on and we have Evelyn in alternate worlds where, like, there's one world that's slightly tweaked where it is her being in this laundromat where like it seems that her laundromat looks successful. And so Evelyn is to go on and have this New Year's this Chinese New Year's party, and all of a sudden is to really be upset and is to break this window because she really hates this place. And so all of a sudden we have it to where Deirdre is making her way to this place, wanting to talk to Evelyn and Waymond, and Evelyn just loses it and breaks this glass. And so we have it to where, like, the police are being called, they want to arrest Evelyn, and so we go on and we have it to where Deirdre is like, well, hey, I didn't realize that you and your husband were going through a divorce. Like, I know how tough that is because I'm going through the same thing, or I went through the same thing. So, like, hey, like, I'll cut you a break. Like, I went on and I smashed a car when like my divorce happened. So, like, I get it. So we just have it to where Evelyn is starting to see all these other alternate versions of herself. And so what Evelyn decides as she's going back with Joy is to try and eventually take Joy and put her through the bagel that has everything in it in her world, because there's also a bagel that has everything that just appears in Evelyn's world. And so Evelyn is to go on and try to just let go of Joy, because in the alternate world where Evelyn was to go on and break through this glass, as she went on and talked to Joy, Joy was just telling her to let her go. That, like, she, like, doesn't want She doesn't want to be here anymore. She doesn't like this family. Blah 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 blah. Generic dialogue here. Insert. We have to where Evelyn is to take the word of that Joy and carry it on to every other Joy. To just have Evelyn let Joy go and let her go into this bagel that has everything. And all of a sudden we go on and we have Evelyn that is to realize that Joy's hand is grasping back out. And so now we have it where Evelyn is being grabbed by Gong Gong and Waymond, and Evelyn is trying to pull Joy back out, and it's like her world's Joy. And then it seems that everything is right with the world again, and that we end up eventually having it to where this world has seemingly gone back to normal. And so we have Evelyn who's telling Becky, like, hey, grow your hair out, this and that, and both Becky and Joy are kissing, as well as Evelyn is to tell Gong Gong that Joy is to have a girlfriend named Becky and just, like, freaking accept it. Like, come on. So, with that said, that's how the movie eventually just kind of rattles off and finishes up, as we are to seem to have this Evelyn that possibly at some point is still going to be universe hopping and being able to do all of this stuff that I kind of really quickly went through. There was also the part where Evelyn was to go on and rat out that the one sushi chef was to go on and have this raccoon on his head, and the animal people, the people that end up taking wild animals end up taking this raccoon. And so Evelyn and this guy are running after this raccoon, and I guess this probably would be like the Joy that is actually a guy in that world, probably. Maybe that makes sense. So we go on and we have Evelyn and we have this guy chasing after this raccoon on this vehicle. And so the whole thing is cruxing on that Evelyn is carrying this guy is carrying Evelyn, and like they're trying to be like the raccoon and the chef and whatever. And so that is the weirdest, goofiest thing that happens in this film. But eventually we go on and supposedly have the guy that ends up getting back with this raccoon, and eventually all is right with the world. So I think that is the goofiest thing that I have to leave off of, besides the whole like rock to rock dialogue, where eventually the one rock is to go after Joy and knock the girl rock over the ledge, and so she just falls. The Joy rock. So, but we also had Evelyn, who is to go on and put this Google eye on her forehead, to eventually realize that she is going to be like all these Evelyns all at once, to where all of a sudden all the other people that's around her have all these Google eyes all over them also. And then Evelyn is to figure out the perfect way of beating every single person that comes to her, because all of the characters that are to be stacked up against her are all people she knows how to defeat, like changing a grenade into a thing of perfume to subdue one person, to go on and take a certain item and change it into this, change it into that. Bizarrely have some dominatrix moment where Evelyn is to eventually put a ball gag for one of these guys and to spank him and defeat him that way, and so on and so forth. Like, again, a lot of just goofy things happen towards the end of this movie, and I can't remember them all, and why should I? Because this movie is just all over the goddamn place. So, at the end of the day, I try to do my best to review this movie, but this movie is incredibly hard, because it has everything everywhere all at once. So with that said, that is my attempt on trying to somehow review this movie, because it's difficult. So with that said, I try to do my best. This movie doesn't make a lot of sense, but there it is. For you to say that you can have heard me try to figure out how to frickin' review this movie, because good God. Just remembering all of this garbage, I'm just like, why? I need to empty out my brain of this useless nonsense. But there we are. There you go. So I'm going to get the heck out of here because, yeah, I'm going to go on and hopefully be able to review the latest episode of Superman and Lois. So that might go on and maybe be a thing that I go on and do. So thank you for going on and watching this for whatever reason. I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this movie or felt about my review, because I'm sure it was all freaking all over the place. I am sorry, but at the end of the day, whew, this movie. So yeah. With that said, I'm just gonna get the heck out of here. Let me know in the comments below. But anyways, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. One thing that I want to mention is because I forgot about it. We had the one girl who was the dog mom, and we had it to where all these side characters were to go on and eventually be the lackeys of Joy. So all of the alternate versions from Joe Boo's world, like the dog mom, and certain other customers that normally would be very familiar to Evan or just kind of rando people at some point, all are to come in from this alternate world to be here. And we go on and have it at one point where Evelyn is to fight off the dog mom, and the dog mom is to all of a sudden use her dog on this leash as this weapon, as this like crazy weapon that she's to go up against Evelyn with. And so Evelyn goes on and is to use her sushi like cutting ability to then get this knife, and is to go on and fling this knife and be able to combat the dog mom, and it is to cut this leash, so now the dog mom has nothing to fight with. And like, I just thought that that was so odd that I had to bring it up so I can go on and have like some kind of relief of just kind of mentioning, like, okay, like I mentioned that there was a number of rando people that all came into this one location trying to fight off Evelyn, so I completely forgot about that. There probably will be a billion bajillion things I'd forgotten about, so let me know in the comments below, because I know that's going to eventually happen. Or eventually I might have misstepped somewhere, so I apologize, or maybe I missaid something. Anyways, because I know I kind of like kept saying like the same dialogue over and over, because really like any of this dialogue was really meaningless. But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to kind of rush through and kind of get this done. So if there was anything that kind of popped in my brain before I was to go on and put this out, like that's what I was trying to do. So with that said, let me know in the comments below, because I will forget something. I know, like, there was the one part where we had like the movie like halfway through that is to start doing this like credit roll. I'm like, what the fuck? And all of a sudden we found out that Evelyn, when she's the movie star version of Evelyn, like her movie is to finish up, and then like afterwards we have both Waymond, we have Evelyn who's having this conversation. And like, I thought it was like, okay, like, are they trying to troll us? And that what it feels like what they're doing to create an ending that wasn't really there. So yeah. uh like, we also had the one time where while Joy was fighting the one police officer, she turns him into confetti. I completely forgot about that. So there's the confetti police officer. There's a time where she's dancing with somebody. There's a wrestling part. There's like these goofy parts where she was to get shot and it's ketchup and all these goofy things. Uh, but I wanted to get that one thing off. And I think there was one point when, like, there was a cigarette moment where like this officer is there, and Joy is to go on and put the cigarette out on this guy's badge, and that's when eventually the combat starts to happen. But anyways, with that said, I think I'm gonna go on, and yeah, I'm just gonna call this done. So that said, hopefully, goodbye, everybody. Bye, Ray.